Captain Lee Hyun sat in his command chair watching the stars drift past the viewport of the human ship Indomitable. The vessel was not large by galactic standards, but it carried the best crew Earth had to offer. For 50 years, humans had been part of the Galactic Confederation, yet they remained outsiders. Earth was classified as a Category 7 death world, and most alien species preferred to keep their distance from humans. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the engines and the occasional beep from the sensor stations. Dr. Park Mira worked at her science console studying xenobiology reports while Commander Kim Tae monitored their patrol route near the Outer Rim territories. Ambassador Choi Yuna reviewed diplomatic files in her quarters, preparing for another meeting, where other species would politely listen to human concerns and then ignore them completely. Lee Hyun understood why the galaxy feared humans. Earth was a world where everything tried to kill everything else. Humans had evolved to survive storms that could flatten cities, predators that hunted in packs, diseases that wiped out entire populations, and natural disasters that reshaped continents. Most alien worlds were peaceful gardens compared to the nightmare that had forged humanity into what they were today. The communication system suddenly crackled to life with an incoming transmission. The signal was weak and filled with static, but the desperation in the voice was clear even through the interference. A translator device worked to convert the alien language into something humans could understand. The voice belonged to a Villani named Elder Mortani from the mining colony on Kepler 442b. The Villani were a gentle species that had never known war. They built cities from living crystal and spent their days in philosophical contemplation. Their world was a paradise of flowing rivers and singing forests, where violence was so rare that they had no words for many human concepts like murder or revenge. Elder Mortani spoke of ships appearing in their sky 3 days ago. The vessels were unlike anything in Confederation records. They were organic-looking things that seemed to be alive and hungry. The ships had begun consuming the planet itself, breaking apart the crystal cities and harvesting everything they touched. The Villani called these invaders the Ravagers. Dr. Park Mira looked up from her console with concern on her face. She had studied the Villani before and knew they were completely peaceful. They had no military, no weapons, no concept of how to fight back against an invasion. They were like children facing wolves. The transmission continued with Elder Mortani begging for help from the great protector species. These were the 3 most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The Etherians, who lived as pure energy, the crystalline collective who could reshape matter with their thoughts, and the Mentari Federation, whose technology seemed like magic to lesser species. These 3 powers had protected the galaxy for thousands of years and maintained peace through their wisdom and strength. Commander Kim Tae traced the signal to its source and confirmed it was coming from Kepler 442b. The world was far from any major trade routes and had little strategic value. It was exactly the kind of place that raiders might target because help would be slow to arrive. Lee Hyun listened to the entire message twice before making his decision. He opened a channel to Confederation Command and requested permission to investigate the distress call. The response came back within minutes, and it was exactly what he expected. Confederation Command denied the request. The human patrol vessel was ordered to maintain its current route and leave the situation to more appropriate species. The message made it clear that humans were considered too dangerous and unpredictable to handle a delicate rescue operation. The 3 great protector species had been notified and would handle the situation according to proper protocols. Dr. Park Mira stood up from her station and walked over to the captain's chair. She had worked with Lee Hyun for 5 years and knew him well enough to see the anger building behind his calm expression. She also knew that humans had a different relationship with time than most species in the galaxy. The Etherians would need to debate the philosophical implications of intervention versus non-interference. This could take weeks as they considered every possible outcome and consequence. The Crystalline Collective would want to study the situation thoroughly before acting, gathering data, and running simulations that might take months to complete. The Mentari Federation would convene their council of elders who would meditate on the proper course of action for as long as necessary to reach enlightened consensus. Meanwhile, the Volani were dying. Elder Mortani had estimated that his people had perhaps 10 days before the Ravagers consumed everything on their world, including the population. The Great Protector species operated on timescales that made sense for immortal beings, but were useless for saving lives that measured in decades rather than centuries. Ambassador Choi Yuna arrived on the bridge having heard the transmission from her quarters. She understood the political situation better than anyone. If humans acted without permission, they would face serious consequences. Earth might be expelled from the Confederation or face economic sanctions that could cripple human colonies. The price for unauthorized intervention could be enormous. Lee Hyun stood up and walked to the main view screen where the stars continued their eternal dance. He thought about his own childhood on Earth, where hurricanes and earthquakes were normal parts of life. He remembered stories his grandfather told about wars where humans fought and died for people they had never met, simply because it was the right thing to do. The choice was not really a choice at all. Lee Hyun had sworn an oath when he became a Starfleet captain. He promised to protect innocent life wherever he found it. The oath did not mention getting permission first or waiting for proper authorization. It simply said to protect those who could not protect themselves. Commander Kim Tae was already plotting a course to Kepler 442b before his captain gave the order. The entire crew had heard the transmission, and they all understood what needed to be done. Dr. Park Mira began reviewing everything known about Volani physiology in case medical assistance was needed. Ambassador Choi Yuna started preparing legal documents that might help minimize the political damage from their unauthorized actions. Lee Hyun gave the order that would change everything. The Indomitable changed course and began racing toward a dying world at maximum speed. Behind them, they left their assigned patrol route, and ahead of them lay unknown dangers. The crew knew they might be court-martialed or worse for abandoning their orders, but none of them cared. The human ship pushed its engines beyond normal limits as it rushed through space toward Kepler 442b. Engineer Kang Hoon worked miracles in the engine room to squeeze every bit of speed from their systems. Lieutenant John Soo calculated the fastest possible route, while Sergeant Yu Jin prepared the ship's small security force for whatever they might face. Lee Hyun sent encrypted messages to the 4 other human ships operating in Confederation space. He told them about the situation and asked for their help. The response was immediate and unanimous. Captain Nam Suk of the research vessel Curiosity changed course without hesitation. Captain O'Day of the cargo hauler Persistence abandoned his delivery schedule to join them. Captain Ryubin of the survey ship Endurance left his mapping mission to answer the call. Captain Ko-soon of the heavy cruiser Defiance was the furthest away, but pushed her engines to their absolute limits to reach the rendezvous point. 5 human ships were now racing through space toward a world under attack, while the rest of the galaxy debated what should be done. The Confederation watched in growing alarm as their dangerous Deathworlders went rogue. Many species feared this was the beginning of some human conquest or the start of a war that would consume the galaxy. The 5 human ships met at a coordinates point 3 light-years from Kepler 442b, where they could plan their approach without being detected by Confederation monitoring stations. Captain Lee Hyun opened communication channels with the other vessels and found himself looking at 4 faces that showed the same determination he felt burning in his own chest. Captain Nam Suk of the research vessel Curiosity had been studying deep space phenomena when she received Hyun's message. Her ship was designed for science, not combat, but she brought something equally valuable to their mission. Her crew included the best xenobiologists and medical specialists in human space. If they were going to save the Volani, they would need to understand how to help them survive. Captain O'Day commanded the cargo hauler Persistence, and his ship was built for moving massive amounts of supplies across vast distances. The vessel looked ugly compared to sleek military designs, but it could carry more equipment and people than any other ship in their small fleet. O'Day had served as a Marine before becoming a merchant captain, and he understood both logistics and warfare better than most. Captain Ryubin operated the survey ship Endurance. which was equipped with the most advanced sensors and mapping equipment humans had ever built. His crew could analyze planetary conditions, locate hidden structures, and find safe landing zones even in hostile environments. Ryu Bin himself was an expert in exploration and survival who had mapped dozens of worlds across the galaxy. Captain Kosun commanded the heavy cruiser Defiance, and she was the closest thing humans had to a true warship. Her vessel carried weapons systems that made other Confederation species nervous and defensive shields that could withstand tremendous punishment. Kosun was a veteran of the few conflicts humans had been involved in since joining the galaxy, and she knew how to fight when fighting was necessary. The 5 captains quickly developed a plan that played to each ship's strengths, while acknowledging they had no idea what they would find when they reached Kepler 442b. The Ravagers were unknown to Confederation databases, which meant they were either from outside the galaxy, or they came from some unexplored region where no one had survived to report their existence. Dr. Park Mira worked with the scientific teams from all 5 ships to analyze every detail of Elder Mortani's transmission. The Villani description of organic ships that consumed planetary matter suggested the Ravagers were some kind of biological species, rather than a technological civilization. This gave them important clues about how to fight an enemy that might be more like a disease or parasite than traditional warriors. Engineer Kang Hoon coordinated with his counterparts on the other vessels to ensure their engines could maintain maximum speed for the journey to Kepler 442b. Human ships were built tougher than most alien designs because they had to survive in Earth's hostile environment before reaching space. This meant they could be pushed harder and faster than their specifications suggested without suffering catastrophic failures. Commander Kim Tae analyzed what little tactical information they had about the Ravagers and developed several battle plans depending on what they encountered. The humans had one major advantage that most Confederation species lacked. They were used to fighting enemies that wanted to kill them. Earth's evolutionary history had produced a species that excelled at violence when violence was necessary for survival. Lieutenant John Su calculated their approach vector to arrive at Kepler 442b from the system's outer edge, where they might avoid immediate detection. The plan was to assess the situation before engaging the enemy, and hopefully coordinate with any surviving Villani forces. If the gentle aliens could be organized into resistance groups, they might be able to help with evacuation efforts or provide intelligence about Ravager weaknesses. Ambassador Choi Yuna prepared for what might be humanity's final communication with the Confederation. She drafted messages explaining their actions and accepting full responsibility for violating direct orders. The political consequences would be severe, but she believed history would vindicate their decision to act when others chose to debate. Sergeant Yu Jin worked with security chiefs from all 5 ships to prepare their limited ground forces for surface operations. They had less than 300 combat-trained personnel between all their vessels, but each human soldier was worth several times their number in traditional galactic conflicts. Humans fought differently than other species because they came from a world where everything was trying to kill them. The journey to Kepler 442b took 18 hours at maximum speed, and the human crews used every minute to prepare for what lay ahead. Dr. Park Mira studied Villani biology to determine how best to provide medical assistance to survivors. She discovered that the crystal-based aliens had very different nutritional needs than humans, but their basic life support requirements were compatible with human technology. Captain Nam Suk's research teams analyzed atmospheric data from Kepler 442b and found disturbing changes since the last Confederation survey. The planet's oxygen levels were dropping while toxic compounds were increasing in the atmosphere. This suggested the Ravagers were not just consuming the surface, but actually poisoning the air itself as part of their feeding process. Engineer Kang Hoon worked with his teams to modify their ship's transporters and shuttle bays for rapid evacuation procedures. They would need to move large numbers of refugees quickly if they were going to save any significant portion of the Villani population. The modifications pushed their equipment beyond normal parameters, but human engineering was designed to work under extreme conditions. Captain O'Day reorganized his cargo holds to accommodate thousands of potential refugees, while maintaining life support systems that could keep them alive during transport. His crew had experience moving live cargo, including various alien species, so they understood the challenges of keeping different life forms healthy in the same environment. Captain Ryubin deployed sensor probes ahead of their fleet to gather intelligence about the Kepler 442b system before they arrived. The probes revealed multiple large objects in orbit around the planet that matched the description of Ravager bioships. The vessels appeared to be literally eating the planet's surface and converting the matter into additional ship mass. Captain Kosun prepared her weapon systems for combat against enemies of unknown capability. Human weapons were designed to work in Earth's hostile environment, which meant they were robust and reliable under extreme conditions. More importantly, they were designed to kill things that were very hard to kill, which might prove crucial against biologically based enemies. The 5 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442b system and immediately went to silent running to avoid detection. What they saw through their sensors horrified even the battle-hardened humans, who thought they had seen the worst the galaxy could offer. Kepler 442b was dying. The beautiful crystal cities that had once covered the planet's surface were being systematically devoured by massive organic ships that looked like enormous insects or parasites. The Ravager vessels were kilometers long and appeared to be alive, pulsing with internal light as they consumed everything they touched. The planet's once blue oceans were turning black as the bioships released toxic waste into the water. The singing forests that had been home to millions of Villani were burning or being harvested for biomass. Even from space, the humans could see that entire continents had been stripped bare of all life and vegetation. Dr. Park Mira counted at least 30 Ravager ships in orbit around the planet, with more arriving from deep space every few hours. Each vessel was larger than anything in the human fleet, and they moved with the fluid grace of living creatures rather than mechanical spacecraft. The bioships seemed to be part of a single organism that communicated through unknown means. Captain Lee Hyun opened a channel to address all 5 human crews simultaneously. He told them what they all already knew. They were vastly outnumbered and outgunned by an enemy they did not understand. The smart move would be to retreat and wait for proper military reinforcements that might arrive in time to find an empty world stripped of all life. Instead, he asked his people a simple question that defined everything humans believed about their place in the galaxy. Are we going to let innocent people die while we wait for someone else to save them? The answer came back from 300 human voices speaking as one, and it was exactly what he expected to hear. The 5 ships broke from their hiding positions and began their attack run toward Kepler 442b. They were heading into a battle they could not win against enemies they did not understand to save people they had never met. It was the most human thing they could possibly do, and the galaxy was about to learn what that meant. The 5 human ships approached Kepler 442b like predators stalking prey, even though they were vastly outnumbered by the Ravager bioships consuming the planet. Captain Lee Hyun watched his tactical display as Commander Kim Tae identified priority targets among the massive organic vessels that pulsed with alien life. The enemy ships were so large they dwarfed the human fleet, but size meant nothing if you knew where to strike. Dr. Park Mira had spent the approach analyzing sensor data from the bioships and made a discovery that changed their entire battle plan. The Ravager vessels were not just alive, but appeared to share a collective nervous system that connected them like organs in a single massive creature. She identified what looked like neural clusters scattered throughout each ship that might serve as command centers or communication nodes. Captain Ko Soon brought the heavy cruiser Defiance in first, her weapon systems charging as she prepared to test human firepower against biological armor. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant John Soo, had identified the largest bioship which seemed to be coordinating the others. If they could damage or destroy the command vessel, it might disrupt the entire feeding operation. The Ravagers noticed the approaching human ships but showed no immediate concern. The bioships had consumed dozens of worlds and faced countless species that tried to defend their homes. Every civilization they encountered either fled in terror or fought briefly before, being overwhelmed and devoured. They expected these small vessels to follow the same pattern. They were wrong about humans in ways that would cost them everything. Captain Ko Soon opened fire with precision strikes that targeted the neural clusters Dr. Park Mira had identified. Human weapons were designed to penetrate Earth's toughest materials, and the concentrated energy beams sliced through biological armor like heated knives through flesh. The massive bioship shuddered as explosions tore through its internal organs. The Ravager vessel screamed across frequencies that hurt human ears, but the sound was nothing compared to the pain signals flooding through the collective nervous system. For the first time in their existence, the bioships experienced coordinated agony, as their shared network carried the damage from one vessel to all the others. Commander Kim Tae watched as the wounded bioship began to thrash wildly, its movements becoming erratic as damaged neural pathways sent conflicting signals throughout its massive form. The other Ravager vessels moved to surround the human ships, but their coordination was broken by the feedback from their injured member. Captain O'Day brought the cargo hauler Persistence into low orbit above the planet's surface, where his modified transporters began emergency evacuation of Villani survivors. His crew worked with desperate efficiency to locate refugee camps and beam civilians aboard their ship. The cargo holds had been hastily converted into temporary shelters, but they could save thousands of lives if given enough time. The Villani refugees were traumatized and terrified, but they responded to human rescue efforts with gratitude that transcended language barriers. Elder Mortani himself was among the first evacuees, and he immediately began helping coordinate the rescue of other survivors. His knowledge of underground shelter networks proved invaluable for locating hidden groups of his people. Captain Ryu Bin used the survey ship Endurance to map the planet's surface and identify areas where Villani might still be alive. His sensors penetrated deep underground, where he found vast tunnel networks that the crystal builders had carved beneath their cities. Thousands of Villani were hiding in these caverns, protected from the surface devastation, but running out of food and clean air. Engineer Kang Hoon worked miracles with human mining equipment to expand the tunnel networks and create new ventilation systems that could support larger refugee populations. His teams used controlled explosions and earth-moving technology to carve out massive underground chambers where survivors could gather safely while waiting for evacuation. The Ravagers adapted to human tactics faster than expected and began sending smaller bioships to attack the rescue operations on the surface. These creatures were like living fighters that moved through the atmosphere with predatory grace. They targeted the human shuttles and transport beams that were stealing their food supply. Sergeant Yu Jin led the first human ground forces to set foot on Kepler 442b and immediately understood why his species was feared throughout the galaxy. The Ravager ground troops were apex predators that had evolved to hunt and consume other life forms. They were fast, strong, and utterly ruthless in their pursuit of prey. They had never faced anything like human soldiers. Yu Jin's teams used tactics that no civilized species would consider acceptable. They set traps using Ravager biology against itself, created explosive devices from mining equipment, and fought with a level of calculated violence that shocked their enemies. The predators found themselves being hunted by creatures that were better at killing than they were. Dr. Park Mira established field medical stations in the underground tunnels where she treated injured Villani using improvised techniques that combined human medicine with crystal-based alien physiology. She discovered that the gentle aliens could be surprisingly resilient when given proper care and the right chemical supplements to boost their immune systems. Captain Nam Suk brought the research vessel Curiosity close to the largest bioships to study their biological functions and find weaknesses that could be exploited. Her sensors revealed that the creatures required specific atmospheric conditions to maintain their feeding cycles. If those conditions could be disrupted, the bioships might become vulnerable or even die. The battle evolved into something the galaxy had never seen before as humans applied Deathworld survival instincts to space warfare. Captain Lee Hyun coordinated attacks that used the bioship's own collective nervous system against them. When one vessel was damaged, all the others felt pain, which disrupted their ability to coordinate defensive measures. Lieutenant Jeon Soo piloted surgical strikes against neural clusters while avoiding the massive tentacles and defensive weapons that sprouted from the bioship's hulls. Human pilots had reflexes trained by dodging Earth's dangerous weather patterns and predatory wildlife. They could fly through hazards that would kill pilots from safer worlds. The Ravagers began to realize they were facing something unprecedented. These small ships fought with a combination of precision and aggression that defied their understanding of galactic warfare. The humans struck fast and hard, then vanished before retaliation could be organized. They used the bioship's size against them by hiding in blind spots and attacking vulnerable points. More importantly, the humans refused to retreat, even when facing impossible odds. Every other species the Ravagers had encountered eventually fled when losses became too severe. These Deathworlders kept fighting with an intensity that seemed to increase as the battle became more desperate. Captain Ko soon discovered that concentrated fire on neural clusters could actually kill sections of bioships by severing them from the collective nervous system. Dead tissue would necrotize and fall away from the main body, reducing the creature's overall mass and combat effectiveness. It was like performing surgery with starship weapons. The wounded bioships began to emit distress calls that reached across the galaxy, alerting other Ravager swarms to the threat these humans represented. The predators had found prey that fought back with methods they could not counter or understand. For the first time in their evolutionary history, they felt something completely alien to their nature. They felt fear. Captain O'Day's cargo holds were filling with Vellani refugees who looked at their human rescuers with amazement and growing hope. These strange aliens from the Death World had answered their call when the great powers of the galaxy chose to debate rather than act. The gentle crystal builders began to understand that sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected sources. Elder Mortani worked alongside human engineers to modify Vellani crystal technology for defensive purposes. The living crystals could be grown rapidly and shaped into barriers that were nearly indestructible. Combined with human weapons and tactics, they created fortified positions that could protect refugee camps from Ravager ground forces. The battle for Kepler 442b was far from over, but the tide had turned in ways that shocked both sides. The humans had proven that bioships could be hurt and killed, while the Ravagers discovered that some prey was too dangerous to hunt. The galaxy was about to learn that Deathworlders made the best protectors precisely because they were the most dangerous predators. The battle for Kepler 442b entered its second day, when long-range sensors detected something that changed everything. Admiral Pak Sang was approaching with 30 human warships that represented the full might of Earth's defense fleet. The message he sent to Captain Lee Hyun was simple and direct. No human stands alone when innocents need protection. The Confederation monitoring stations across the galaxy watched in growing alarm as humanity revealed the true extent of their military capabilities. The peaceful member species had believed humans possessed only a handful of patrol vessels and research ships. They never suspected that Earth maintained a hidden fleet designed for exactly this kind of emergency response. Dr. Song Hee, aboard Admiral Pak Sang's flagship, studied the psychological profiles of the Ravager bioships and made discoveries that terrified even the humans. The creatures operated on pure predatory instinct with no concept of mercy, negotiation, or surrender. They consumed everything they encountered and had been doing so for millions of years across multiple galaxies. What made them truly dangerous was their collective intelligence that allowed them to adapt and learn from each encounter. They had faced countless species and absorbed the knowledge of civilizations that tried to resist their hunger. The bioships represented the accumulated predatory wisdom of an entire evolutionary chain dedicated to consumption. But Dr. Song Hee also found their weakness. The Ravagers had never encountered prey that fought back with ideological conviction rather than simple survival instinct. They understood creatures that fled or creatures that fought to protect themselves, but they could not comprehend beings that sacrificed everything for strangers they had never met. Captain Lee Hyun coordinated the expanded human fleet as more ships took position around Kepler 442b. The bioships found themselves surrounded by vessels that attacked with surgical precision while somehow avoiding massive retaliation. Human captains used Earth-trained instincts to predict how living creatures would move and react in combat situations. Colonel Bae Wan commanded the ground forces that Admiral Pak Sang brought to the planet's surface. His Marines implemented tactics that became legendary throughout the galaxy as examples of Deathworld warfare. They turned the planet's own ecology against the Ravagers, using knowledge gained from surviving Earth's hostile environment. The Ravager ground troops were apex predators that had evolved to hunt in coordinated packs, but they encountered human soldiers who had been trained to kill apex predators. Earth's military doctrine assumed enemies would be fast, strong, intelligent, and utterly without mercy. Human tactics were designed to level those advantages through superior planning and absolute ruthlessness. Colonel Baywan's forces introduced the Ravagers to concepts like acceptable losses and mission completion at any cost. The aliens discovered that humans calculated casualties differently than any species they had encountered. Where other civilizations retreated when losses reached certain percentages, humans continued fighting until the objective was achieved regardless of the price. Engineer Kang Hoon worked with Vellani crystal shapers to create defensive installations that combined human technology with alien materials. The resulting fortifications were nearly indestructible and could be constructed rapidly using living crystal that grew according to programmed patterns. Underground cities began to take shape as safe havens for the refugee population. The Vellani themselves began to change under human influence. Dr. Park Mira had been secretly administering adrenaline analogs and combat stimulants that awakened aggressive instincts the gentle aliens never knew they possessed. The crystal builders discovered they could fight back against their tormentors when given the proper chemical and psychological tools. Elder Mortani led the first Vellani military unit in his species' recorded history. Armed with human weapons and protected by crystal armor, the transformed refugees became fierce defenders of their world. They fought with the desperation of beings who had lost everything and the determination of those who finally had hope for revenge. Captain Ko Soon's heavy cruiser Defiance became the focal point for human fleet operations as her weapon systems proved most effective against bioship neural clusters. Her tactical teams developed new firing patterns that could sever bioships from their collective network, causing massive creatures to die in writhing agony as their nervous systems collapsed. The Ravager bioships began to retreat from direct confrontation with human vessels, preferring to attack evacuation shuttles and ground installations. They discovered that humans responded to such tactics by becoming more aggressive, rather than more cautious. Each attack on civilians resulted in escalated retaliation that targeted bioship breeding chambers and feeding organs. Lieutenant Jian Su pioneered fighter tactics that used bioship anatomy against itself. Human pilots learned to fly inside the massive creatures through wounds and damaged sections, attacking vital organs from within, before escaping through exit wounds. The bioships had no defense against enemies that willingly entered their bodies to cause maximum damage. Captain O'Day's cargo operations expanded to include offensive capabilities as his crews used mining equipment and industrial tools as improvised weapons. Freight containers became missile warheads while construction materials were converted into explosive devices. The humans turned every piece of civilian equipment into instruments of war. Admiral Pak Sang implemented Protocol Omega, which represented the pinnacle of human military doctrine. The protocol eliminated all restrictions on acceptable tactics, except the protection of innocent life. Human forces were authorized to use any means necessary to complete their mission, including methods that other species considered barbaric or insane. Under Protocol Omega, human ships began ramming attacks against bioships when conventional weapons proved insufficient. Crews evacuated to escape pods while their vessels struck neural clusters at maximum velocity, using the ships themselves as kinetic weapons. The Ravagers had never faced enemies willing to destroy their own vessels to achieve tactical objectives. The psychological impact on the bioships was devastating. Dr. Song Hee observed through sensor readings that the collective nervous system was experiencing something analogous to panic as the creatures encountered tactical concepts their evolutionary programming could not process. They were apex predators facing prey that acted like apex predators. Captain Nam Suk's research teams made the breakthrough that turned the tide permanently in humanity's favor. They discovered that bioship neural networks operated on specific biochemical frequencies that could be disrupted using modified human medical equipment. The technique essentially gave the massive creatures the equivalent of seizures that paralyzed their combat capabilities. The Vellani refugees in their underground cities watched human shuttle crews risk their lives repeatedly to evacuate more survivors from dangerous areas. They saw human soldiers charge into impossible situations to rescue small groups of aliens they had never met. The crystal builders began to understand that these Deathworlders operated according to principles that transcended simple survival. Captain Ryubin discovered vast Ravager nursery ships hidden on the dark side of Kepler 442b's moon. These vessels contained millions of larval bioships that would eventually mature into planet-consuming monsters. The existence of the nurseries explained how the Ravagers could maintain their numbers, despite the losses they were suffering in battle. The human response was immediate and uncompromising. Admiral Pak Sang deployed his entire fleet to destroy the nursery ships before the larvae could reach maturity. The attack required every available vessel and left Kepler 442b temporarily undefended, but it eliminated the next generation of Ravagers before they could threaten other worlds. The battle for the nurseries became the most vicious fighting of the entire war as adult bioships defended their offspring with desperate fury. Human ships faced overwhelming odds, but pressed their attacks with characteristic determination. They were not just fighting for Kepler 442b anymore, but for every world the larvae might consume in the future. When the nursery ships finally died in nuclear fire, the remaining Ravager bioships emitted sounds of anguish that could be heard across multiple star systems. The creatures had lost not just a battle but their entire future as a species. For beings whose existence centered on consumption and reproduction, the loss was literally incomprehensible. The surviving bioships began to flee toward deep space, abandoning their feeding operation on Kepler 442b. They had learned that these humans were not prey but predators more dangerous than themselves. The galaxy's apex consumers were running from Deathworlders who fought for principles they could not understand. Admiral Pak Sang watched the retreating bioships and made a decision that would reshape galactic civilization. He ordered his fleet to pursue and destroy every fleeing Ravager vessel to ensure they could never threaten another world. The humans would not be content with defensive victory when they could achieve permanent security through complete elimination of the threat. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the transformed world hosted representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy. The crystal cities had been rebuilt using Volani technology, enhanced with human engineering principles. Where once stood peaceful meditation gardens now rose defensive installations that could repel any future invasion. The gentle philosophers had become warrior protectors under human guidance. Elder Mortani stood before the Galactic Confederation Assembly, wearing armor forged from living crystal and carrying weapons that combined Volani artistry with human lethality. His species had survived extinction and emerged stronger than ever before. He spoke words that echoed across the galaxy and changed everything about how civilizations viewed protection and power. The Volani leader described their desperate hours, when death seemed certain, and how they had called for help from the great powers of the galaxy. The Etherians, Crystalline Collective, and Mentari Federation had received their pleas and begun the careful deliberations that defined their ancient wisdom. Committees were formed, philosophical debates initiated, and proper protocols established for eventual intervention. Meanwhile, humans had simply answered the call and arrived to fight. They brought no committees or protocols, just warships and soldiers willing to die for people they had never met. Elder Mortani told the assembly that his people had prayed for gods to save them, but humans had come instead, and they learned that sometimes gods were those willing to bleed for strangers. Ambassador Thanrix of the Etherians listened to these words with growing discomfort as he realized the implications for his civilization's role in the galaxy. The energy beings had spent eons perfecting philosophical approaches to conflict resolution that prioritized wisdom over action. They had believed their methods were superior because they avoided unnecessary violence and preserved life through careful negotiation. The humans had demonstrated a different approach that achieved better results through direct action and willingness to accept personal sacrifice. Ambassador Thanrix posed the question that haunted every advanced civilization in the assembly. If the Deathworlders could save lives while the great powers debated philosophy, what did that say about the value of their accumulated wisdom? President Li Han of Earth addressed the Confederation with humanity's new position in galactic affairs. The polite requests for equal treatment were over, replaced by demands backed by proven military capability. Earth no longer sought acceptance as a junior member of the galactic community, but recognition as the primary defense force for all threatened civilizations. The proposal was simple and non-negotiable. When innocent lives were threatened anywhere in the galaxy, the call would go to human forces first. Other species could debate proper procedures and philosophical implications, while humans deployed to save actual lives. The rescue of Kepler 442b had proven that direct action produced better results than careful deliberation. Captain Li Hyun, now promoted to admiral, established the Human Response Fleet with a mandate to answer distress calls immediately, without waiting for authorization from any other authority. The fleet motto reflected their operational philosophy. Others deliberate, we deliver. Human ships would maintain patrol routes that covered the entire galaxy and could reach any threatened world within days rather than months. The Confederation voted on humanity's demands with results that surprised no one who had witnessed the Battle of Kepler 442b. The measure passed unanimously, though many species voted from fear rather than admiration. They had seen what humans could accomplish when motivated by ideological conviction, and none of them wanted to face that determination as enemies rather than allies. Admiral Pak Sang commanded the expanded human defense force from a new base established in orbit around Kepler 442b. The symbolic importance was clear. Humans would protect what others had failed to save and build strength where others had seen only weakness. The base became a training center where other species could learn human tactics and defensive strategies. Dr. Park Mira founded the Interspecies Medical Corps that combined human emergency medicine with alien biological knowledge. Her teams could treat injuries and illnesses across dozens of different species, using techniques developed during the desperate hours of the Villani rescue. The Corps became the galaxy's premier medical response organization for crisis situations. Colonel Bei Wan established the Deathworld Training Academy, where military personnel from peaceful species learned how to fight when fighting became necessary. The curriculum included Earth survival techniques, human tactical doctrine, and psychological conditioning that prepared civilized beings for the realities of violent conflict. Graduation rates were low, but survivors became elite defenders of their homeworlds. Engineer Kang Hoon led reconstruction efforts on Kepler 442b that demonstrated how human engineering could enhance rather than replace alien technology. The hybrid crystal metal structures were stronger than either material alone and could be adapted for use on any world. His techniques became standard for defensive construction throughout Confederation space. The Villani themselves became humanity's strongest advocates and closest allies in the galactic community. Their transformation from gentle philosophers to fierce warriors inspired other peaceful species to reconsider their own defensive capabilities. Elder Mortani established exchange programs that sent Villani students to Earth to learn human military science, while human scholars studied crystal-based technology. Lieutenant Jian Su pioneered new fighter tactics that were adopted by pilot training academies across the galaxy. His combat methods emphasized aggression, calculated risk-taking, and willingness to sacrifice individual safety for mission success. These concepts were alien to most species, but proved devastatingly effective against traditional enemies. Captain Kosun designed the new generation of human warships that combined lessons learned from the bioship battles with advanced alien technology. Her vessels were faster, stronger, and more lethal than anything the galaxy had seen before. The ships were offered to allied species, but few civilizations possessed crews capable of operating such aggressive weapon systems. Dr. Song He published psychological studies of human motivation that became required reading for diplomats and military leaders throughout the Confederation. Her work explained how Deathworld evolution created beings willing to die for abstract principles like justice and protection of innocence. Other species struggled to understand such concepts, but learned to respect their effectiveness. The Ravagers themselves became a cautionary tale told throughout the galaxy about the dangers of predatory expansion. Human forces had hunted down and eliminated every bioship that fled from Kepler 442b, ensuring the species could never again threaten civilized worlds. The galaxy's former apex predators existed only in historical records and diplomatic warnings. Captain Nam Suk's research teams established monitoring stations throughout unexplored regions of space to provide early warning of any new threats that might emerge from the galactic rim. The network ensured that no hostile force could approach civilized space without being detected and reported to human defense forces for immediate response. The first test of the new galactic order came 6 months after Kepler 442b, when distress signals arrived from the far rim, reporting unknown attackers consuming mining colonies. Traditional Confederation response would have required weeks of committee, meetings, and diplomatic consultations before any action was authorized. Instead, Admiral Lee Hyun's response was immediate and overwhelming. Human ships departed within hours of receiving the distress call, while other species were still scheduling their first planning meetings. The attackers, a swarm of mechanical devourers similar to the Ravagers, found themselves facing human forces that had been specifically designed to counter their tactics. The brief battle demonstrated that the galaxy now possessed a rapid response capability that could neutralize threats before they became existential dangers. Innocent lives were saved measured in hours rather than lost measured in months, while committees debated proper procedures. Ambassador Choi Yuna addressed the Confederation after the successful defense mission, with words that defined humanity's new role in galactic civilization. The age of philosophical debate over intervention while innocents died was over, replaced by immediate action backed by overwhelming force. The Deathworlders had become exactly what the galaxy needed, even if they remained what most species feared. President Lee Han announced Earth's final position to the assembled civilizations with characteristic human directness. Humanity would serve as the galaxy's sword and shield, protecting those who could not protect themselves and destroying threats that endangered innocent life. Other species could continue their ancient debates about proper procedures, while humans ensured there would be someone left alive to benefit from their eventual wisdom. The galaxy accepted this arrangement because they had seen the alternative. When the Ravagers came calling, philosophical wisdom and diplomatic protocols proved worthless against creatures that understood only consumption and destruction. Only human violence and sacrifice had been sufficient to preserve civilization itself. As Admiral Lee Hyun prepared for the next emergency call that would inevitably come,